It's Join the Aisle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, reviews of The Best Man, Evita, and Death of a Salesman. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two on the Aisle. Good evening, I am Charles Gross.
And I'm the aforementioned Leslie Hoban Blake.
Yes, our Drama Desk Vice President.
Thank you. So what's left now is Death of a Salesman, which is even longer than 20 years ago. This one, the first time around, was back in the 50s.
Right, but or was it the 50s or was it earlier?
I think it was the 40s. You're probably right. It was in the 40s.
Look, it's been around for many, many years. It's been revived several times. Dustin Hoffman.
I wanted to just go back to the beginning, if I may, because I got to talk to Arthur Miller about this, and this is something very interesting to me. The play originally starred Lee J. Cobb, who was a very large man, playing the character Willie Loman, as everybody knows. And Willie Loman is a salesman, and he is the last of a dying breed of salesmen who goes out on the road. And the whole idea is, and it's based on Arthur Miller's father, and the idea is that people don't have to go out on the road anymore at the time that the play is taking place. The telephone and other things make it so that they don't have to do the traveling, and nobody wants this particular Willie. Willie has an idea about himself that people like him and people don't like him. He doesn't. Nobody likes him. His kids don't even really like him. And what really happens in this play. His neighbor likes him. His neighbor's a nice guy. His neighbor would like anybody. But the idea is that the play really takes place in Willie's mind as he's having a breakdown. And that was how it was originally staged. And I, of course, didn't see that staging back then. But I never saw it staged that way until now. And what Mike Nichols has done is to go back to the original staging and the original drawings, and also an original musical score that was written for it. And so here's somebody who's gone back to something that happened 60 years ago, and he made it wonderfully alive for now. Now, you started to say, you said Dustin Hoffman, all the various and sundry Willie Lomans over the years, and I did see Dustin Hoffman, and I did see George C. Scott, and I did see more recently Brian Dennehy. So I've seen Willie Lomans, and they tend to, our Willie Loman now is Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's much too young for the role, but that's not necessarily the important thing.
Yeah.
Well, he's too young. He himself personally is too young to have two boys of that age at this point. But anyhow, well, I guess maybe not if you think about it. But anyway, the idea is he's not a particularly imposing character. He's not a large man. He's a soft.
Well, he sure is here. He's a lot larger than Dustin Hoffman.
He's not tall, large. I mean, he's large in that sense. But the others, Brian Dennehy and Lee J. Cobb and George C. Scott, were big men and imposing in that sense, tall, not big around. So anyway, the idea is that this is the mental breakdown of, and that's what comes really across in this particular production, is you definitely see the mental breakdown.
I think every time I see this play or I read it, I do tend to come with a different impression of it. I think when I first read it, and I was a teenager then, I was really very annoyed at Willie because I felt, his whole, the problems of his oldest son, Biff, and Biff is basically a drifter, and he's never really made anything of himself, but he was a high school athlete, and he was going on to a promising college scholarship, and then he he visits his father on the road unexpectedly, and Willie is entertaining a lady who was not his wife, and Biff sees this, and it's like a downhill spiral for him, and he basically throws everything that he had away. And for that aspect, I've always blamed Willie. I think in more subsequent productions, you certainly feel the pain. I disagree that Willie is the last of his breed. Salesmen still travel even in this day and age. People still travel on business, as much, maybe even more so. So I don't think the telephone has completely replaced the traveling salesman, or I should say the traveling businessman. I think the problem is not so much that Willie is the last of his kind, but Willie has reached the end of his useful working life, at least as far as his employer is concerned. And it's very hard, the problem with Willie is it's very hard to know what's true and what's not. Because he's been selling so long, he's selling everybody a bill of goods. Like, he doesn't even know the truth anymore. Did he open up a territory for his company? That part I actually believe he did. But there's so many other things that he says that at first I thought, well, maybe it's true when I first saw the play. Now I have my doubts. The problem here is what came to me is, yes, he is having a breakdown, but the delusions of everything.
But you see that. But I mean, that's written in, and here's what I think.
But
is
here
so,
it's more potent.
Well,
I think your analysis is correct, that he is having a mental breakdown because he can't tell the past from the present. And yes, that's written from the play. But that's what I took away from this production, more so than the here's this everyman being tossed aside. Although that is certainly an important part.
To you and to me and to us and how we've aged and grown during the time that we've been able to see this. I mean, I'm talking now about seeing it. And there was a film as well, so I did get to see Lee J. Cobb play it in the film.
Right.
How many times have we seen it, and what age were we? You identified with Biff in the beginning. Obviously, you were thinking of the young man, not of the old man. Now we're both older, and now we can see this as a picture of a family and what goes wrong. I mean, the way he treats his wife is disgraceful. And then on top of that, for the son to see him give stockings, his wife doesn't have stockings, and he gives stockings to the woman on the road. I mean, wonderful little touches.
I'm still annoyed at him for that. He still does. Although I think Biff, I want to say, Biff, you idiot. You weren't punishing your father. You were punishing yourself. You've killed your whole life.
Well, but kids don't understand that. Kids do different things for different reasons. You know, I said I met Arthur Miller, and the thing that he talked about, he had just come back, and it was in the mid-'80s, and he had just come back from directing this play in Beijing in Chinese. So he had to have interpreters and a Chinese cast, and there was a total understanding of the play. Now, the Chinese have, as the Japanese do, businessmen, and it's a particular kind of lifestyle. And so they totally understood the concept of being a salesman for your whole life and what it means when that usefulness is over. And one thing that Arthur Miller said at the time, because the one that he was working on at that time was the Dustin Hoffman one, he said, you know, my father was really a small man, and Dustin is a small guy, and he's the one who reminds me most of my father. And yet all the others were big because Lee J. Cobb was big. And, you know, the reason that
he originally, when Hoffman's production came out, he said, I originally envisioned Willie as a small man. And Hoffman's Willie, he was a salesman. He was always selling. Dustin Hoffman.
Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, he was always, his Willie was always selling, you know, no matter he really was the salesman, more, I think, than a lot of the other actors who have played it.
The lines are the same.
The lines are the same, but again, but you again pointed out, this is what I got from this production. So the staging, the direction, it all matters. At any rate.
This is Mike Nichols.
I did like this production, but I think the interesting one thing you do take away, this is any society. People will say, oh, it's capitalism. It's any society, anybody who was useful and no longer is.
Which is why
it will play in China. Right. It will play pretty much anywhere. The basic themes are fairly universal. I will give this 3.5 playbills.
I would give the first act 5.
Really?
And the second act 3.
Okay.
It lost me as
kind
it
of
went
4.
on.
So it kind of averages out to 4.
It averages out.
Okay. And that's our show for the evening. When you go to the theater, look for Leslie and me, us too.
On the aisle.
Okay.